What happens when a self-made billionaire underestimates a soccer legend? On one unforgettable flight, Cristiano Ronaldo showed him that true greatness isn't measured in money. The airport buzzed with the hum of travelers, a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases and hurried footsteps. Cristiano Ronaldo stepped through the glass doors, his presence quiet yet commanding. Dressed in a crisp white t-shirt, dark sunglasses perched on his nose, and a sleek black cap pulled low, he moved with the grace of a man who knew the world watched him but didn't need to prove it. No entourage, no fanfare, just him. A small duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and that unmistakable aura of discipline and charisma. He was headed to Europe for a charity event, one of those low-key visits to kids in need that he did without cameras or headlines. Ronaldo, the global icon, preferred these moments away from the spotlight, where his heart could speak louder than his fame. At the check-in counter, a young agent named Mia caught his eye, her face lighting up with a shy smile. "Mr. Ronaldo, it's an honor," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "Everything good, Mia?" he replied, his Portuguese accent softened by warmth, shaking her hand like an old friend. She handed him his boarding pass for the executive class, her fingers fumbling slightly, and he nodded, flashing that million-dollar smile that felt like it cost nothing at all. He made his way to the gate, pausing to snap selfies with a few fans who approached, their eyes wide with awe. Ronaldo didn't rush them. He listened, laughed, and signed a kid's soccer jersey with a quick, practiced flourish. Sitting in a corner of the lounge, he scrolled through his phone, earbuds in, watching highlights of his old matches, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The world saw the goals, the records, the trophies, but here he was just a guy, waiting for a flight, grounded in a way that fame rarely allowed. Quick challenge: if you're pumped for this Ronaldo story, comment "Let's go!" and subscribe now. Stay till the end for a twist you won't see coming. Boarding began, and Ronaldo stepped onto the plane, nodding to the flight crew with a polite, "Good morning." The executive cabin smelled of leather and coffee, its dim lights casting a soft glow over the plush seats. He settled by the window, his long legs stretched out, earbuds resting in his lap as he gazed at the tarmac outside. The plane filled slowly, passengers shuffling in with briefcases and designer bags. Then came James Carver, a tech mogul whose name dominated Silicon Valley headlines. Tall, broad-shouldered, and clad in a tailored navy suit, Carver strode in like he owned the sky itself. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp with the kind of arrogance that came from closing billion-dollar deals before breakfast. He scanned the cabin, his gaze landing on Ronaldo with a flicker of disdain. His lips curled slightly, as if the sight of the soccer star in this exclusive space was an insult to his status. Muttering under his breath, he tossed his briefcase onto the seat next to Ronaldo's, the thud loud enough to turn heads. "This is what passes for executive class now?" he said, loud enough for the cabin to hear, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Ronaldo glanced up, his expression calm, almost amused, but he said nothing, just adjusted his cap and leaned back. The air grew thick with tension, a silent challenge hanging between them. Mia, the young flight attendant, approached with a tray of drinks, her smile professional but strained. "Welcome aboard, gentlemen. Can I get you anything?" she asked, her eyes darting nervously between the two men. Carver waved her off with a flick of his wrist, his gold Rolex glinting under the cabin lights. "Just make sure this flight stays quiet," he snapped, shooting a pointed look at Ronaldo. The soccer star didn't flinch. He took a glass of orange juice from Mia, thanked her with a nod, and said, "Relax, my friend. We're all just trying to get somewhere." His voice was steady, laced with that quiet confidence that had silenced stadiums. Carver scoffed, loosening his tie as if the very air around Ronaldo was suffocating. "You athletes," he muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to shift uncomfortably. "Always acting like you belong everywhere." The words stung, sharp and laced with prejudice, but Ronaldo only chuckled softly, shaking his head like he'd heard it all before. Mia froze, her tray trembling slightly, unsure how to defuse the moment. A teenage boy, Ethan, seated a few rows back, leaned forward, his eyes wide with excitement, as he whispered to his mom, "That's Cristiano Ronaldo." His voice carried a reverence that made Carver's jaw tighten further. Carver sank into his seat, his movements deliberate, as if claiming territory. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through stock charts with exaggerated focus, his fingers tapping loudly on the screen. Every now and then, he'd glance at Ronaldo, his expression a mix of irritation and superiority. Ronaldo, meanwhile, slipped his earbuds in, letting the faint hum of music drown out the mogul's posturing. Outside, the plane taxied toward the runway, the engine's low rumble vibrating through the cabin. Passengers settled in, but Carver's restlessness was palpable. He adjusted his cufflinks, sighed loudly, and muttered something about standards going downhill. A retired coach, Mr. Thompson, seated across the aisle, raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, his weathered face hinting at a story of his own. Ethan, clutching a worn soccer ball, kept stealing glances at Ronaldo, his hero, oblivious to Carver's disdain. The boy's mom, a tired-looking woman named Sarah, whispered to him to stay quiet, but her eyes softened when they met Ronaldo's. There was something about the soccer star's presence, steady, unpretentious, that made the cabin feel smaller, more human, despite Carver's efforts to dominate it. As the plane climbed into the sky, the cabin lights dimmed and the mood shifted. Mia returned, offering warm towels, her smile brighter when she reached Ronaldo. "My brother's a huge fan," she said softly, almost apologetically. "He watches your games on repeat." Ronaldo's eyes lit up. "Tell him to keep training, Mia. Hard work beats talent every time." His words were simple, but they carried weight, and Mia's face flushed with gratitude. Carver rolled his eyes, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "Hard work," he muttered, his voice thick with mockery. "As if that's what got you here." The comment hung in the air, sharp and ugly, drawing a few gasps from nearby passengers. Mr. Thompson shifted in his seat, his gaze narrowing at Carver, but Ronaldo didn't take the bait. He leaned toward the window, watching the clouds roll by, his face serene. The mogul's words were like pebbles thrown into a lake, ripples that faded against Ronaldo's unshakable calm. Ethan, unable to contain himself, whispered loudly to his mom, "He's the best player ever, Mom. He doesn't even care what that guy says." Sarah hushed him, but her smile betrayed her agreement. Carver, sensing the shift in the cabin's attention, doubled down. He leaned toward Ronaldo, his voice low but cutting. "You know, I paid 10 grand for this seat. 10 grand to sit next to, what? A guy who kicks a ball for a living?" The insult was deliberate, meant to provoke, but Ronaldo only turned to him, his eyes steady, almost pitying. "I know what 10 grand feels like," he said quietly. "I also know what it's like to play on dirt fields with no shoes, to work until your legs give out, to carry a whole country's dreams on your back. You tell me what's harder." The words weren't loud, but they landed like a thunderclap. Mia, standing nearby, bit her lip, her eyes shining with admiration. Mr. Thompson let out a low chuckle, shaking his head as if he'd seen this kind of arrogance before. Carver's face reddened, his confidence cracking like thin ice. He opened his mouth to respond but found no words, his usual sharpness dulled by Ronaldo's quiet power. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, every passenger aware of the unspoken battle unfolding. Wealth versus legacy, ego versus grace. The flight stretched on, the hum of the engines a steady backdrop to the tension. Carver fidgeted, his polished exterior unraveling. He pulled out a tablet, scrolling through emails with forced focus, but his glances at Ronaldo betrayed his unease. The soccer star, meanwhile, flipped through a magazine, pausing on a story about youth soccer programs in underserved communities. His finger traced the page, a small smile forming as he read about kids chasing dreams like he once did. Ethan, unable to stay still, unbuckled his seatbelt and crept closer, clutching his soccer ball. "Mr. Ronaldo?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Ronaldo looked up, his face softening instantly. "Hey, champ, you play?" Ethan nodded vigorously, his eyes bright. "I'm a striker, like you." Ronaldo laughed, a deep, genuine sound that seemed to warm the cabin. "Good choice. Keep your head up and your feet quick, all right?" He reached into his bag, pulled out a wristband, and signed it with a quick scroll. "For you," he said, handing it to Ethan, who clutched it like it was gold. Sarah mouthed a silent, "Thank you," her eyes glistening. Carver watched, his jaw tight, the scene cutting deeper than any insult he'd thrown. Mia returned with a tray of snacks, her professionalism masking the pride she felt watching Ronaldo with Ethan. She offered Carver a plate, but he waved it away, his focus still on Ronaldo, who was now chatting quietly with Mr. Thompson about the old days of soccer. The retired coach's gravelly voice carried a hint of nostalgia as he recounted watching Ronaldo's early games in Portugal. "You changed the game, son," he said, his tone fatherly. Ronaldo shrugged, humble but proud. "Just did my job, coach." The exchange was simple, but it carried a weight that Carver couldn't ignore. His world of boardrooms and stock options felt hollow next to the legacy of a man who'd inspired millions with a ball at his feet. The mogul shifted in his seat, his Rolex catching the light again, but this time it felt like a prop, not a trophy. The cabin's attention was on Ronaldo, not because he demanded it, but because he earned it, with every quiet gesture, every kind word. Carver's arrogance, once a shield, was starting to feel like a cage. As the plane cruised through the clouds, the tension between the two men simmered. Carver's earlier bravado had faded, replaced by a restless energy. He tapped his foot, adjusted his tie, and stole glances at Ronaldo, who seemed oblivious to the storm he'd stirred. The soccer star leaned back, eyes closed, a faint smile playing on his lips as he listened to music. His calm was infuriating to Carver, who was used to commanding every room he entered, but here, in this confined space, his wealth meant nothing next to Ronaldo's presence. Mia passed by again, her smile brighter for Ronaldo, her movements careful around Carver. Ethan, back in his seat, was still clutching the signed wristband, whispering excitedly to his mom about meeting his idol. Mr. Thompson flipped through a newspaper, occasionally glancing at Carver with a knowing look, as if he'd seen men like him come and go. The cabin felt like a stage, with Ronaldo at its center, not because he sought the spotlight, but because his authenticity drew it naturally. Carver, for all his power, was starting to feel like a shadow. The flight was far from over, but the dynamic had shifted. Carver's sharp tongue had dulled, his confidence shaken by the quiet strength of the man beside him. Ronaldo, unaware of the storm he'd calmed, continued to be himself, disciplined, kind, unshakable. The passengers around them, from Mia to Ethan to Mr. Thompson, felt it too, a sense that they were witnessing something rare, something real. The plane soared through the sky, carrying them toward a destination. But for Carver, the real journey was just beginning. He didn't know it yet, but the man he'd dismissed as just an athlete was about to teach him a lesson that no boardroom could. A lesson about respect, about humanity, about what it truly means to be great. And as the clouds rolled by outside, the stage was set for a transformation that would leave no one in that cabin unchanged. 2. The plane sliced through the clouds, its steady hum a backdrop to the simmering tension in the executive cabin. The soft glow of overhead lights cast long shadows, and the air felt heavy, charged with the unspoken clash between Cristiano Ronaldo and James Carver. Ronaldo leaned back in his window seat, earbuds in, his face relaxed as he watched the sky shift outside. His calm was a stark contrast to Carver, who fidgeted beside him, his polished exterior fraying at the edges. The tech mogul's fingers drummed on his tablet, his jaw tight, as if Ronaldo's very presence was an affront to his carefully curated world. The cabin was quiet, but the undercurrent of their earlier exchange lingered, drawing the attention of passengers like Mia, the young flight attendant, Ethan, the starry-eyed teen, and Mr. Thompson, the retired coach, whose weathered face held a quiet wisdom. The stage was set for a reckoning, one that would test Carver's arrogance and reveal the depth of Ronaldo's influence, not through confrontation, but through the simple power of being himself. Carver's discomfort was palpable. He shifted in his seat, loosening his tie as if it choked him. His eyes darted to Ronaldo, who seemed oblivious, lost in his music. The mogul's earlier jabs had landed flat, and now he was grasping for control, his ego bruised by the soccer star's unshakable composure. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through a stock app with exaggerated focus, muttering loudly enough for the cabin to hear. 2 million in gains this morning, he said, his voice sharp, as if the number could reassert his dominance. No one responded. Ronaldo didn't even glance his way, his attention fixed on the clouds outside. Mia, passing by with a tray of drinks, offered Carver a glass of sparkling water, but he waved it off, his irritation spilling over. "This is what I get for flying commercial," he grumbled, shooting a pointed look at Ronaldo. "Stuck with entertainers." The word dripped with disdain, and Mia's smile faltered, her eyes flicking to Ronaldo with a mix of admiration and unease. The soccer star, catching her glance, gave a subtle nod, as if to say, "It's all good." His calm diffused her tension, but Carver's words hung in the air, sour and heavy. Across the aisle, Mr. Thompson lowered his newspaper, his grey eyes narrowing at Carver. The old coach had spent decades on sidelines, watching egos rise and fall, and he recognized Carver's type: men who thought money could buy respect. He leaned toward Ronaldo, his voice low but firm. "You know, son, I saw your first game for Manchester United. Changed the way I coached my kids." Ronaldo pulled out an earbud, his face softening with genuine interest. "That means a lot, coach," he said, his accent warm. "You teach him to love the game?" Thompson nodded, a faint smile creasing his face. "Tried to, but you showed him what it looks like to live it." The exchange was brief, but it carried weight, a quiet acknowledgement of Ronaldo's legacy. Carver's lips twitched, his fingers tightening on his phone. The mogul was used to commanding attention, but here it flowed effortlessly to Ronaldo, not because he demanded it, but because he inspired it. Ethan, seated a few rows back, overheard the conversation and leaned forward, clutching his signed wristband, his eyes bright with awe. His mom, Sarah, whispered for him to sit still, but her own gaze lingered on Ronaldo, grateful for the joy he'd brought her son. The cabin's rhythm shifted as Mia began the meal service, her movements brisk but warm. She paused by Ronaldo, offering a plate of grilled chicken and greens, tailored to his athlete's diet. "Special order, Mr. Ronaldo," she said, her voice soft with respect. He thanked her, his smile disarming, and asked, "Your brother still playing?" Mia's face lit up, surprised he remembered. "Yeah, he's trying out for varsity this year. Says he wants to work as hard as you." Ronaldo nodded, his eyes serious. "Tell him it's not just the field. It's the gym, the kitchen, the mind. Every day's a game." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of a man who'd built an empire on discipline. Mia lingered a moment, touched by his sincerity, before moving on. Carver, watching the exchange, let out a sharp laugh, loud enough to turn heads. "Life lessons from a soccer player," he muttered, his tone mocking. "What's next? Motivational posters?" The jab was meant to sting, but Ronaldo only chuckled, shaking his head as he cut into his meal. His restraint was infuriating to Carver, who thrived on confrontation but found no purchase here. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, the cabin jolting sharply. Glasses clinked and a few passengers gasped, gripping their armrests. Mia's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. "Please keep your seatbelts fastened." Ronaldo glanced out the window, unfazed, his hand steady on his tray. Carver, however, froze, his face paling as the plane dipped again. His tablet slid to the floor, and he scrambled to grab it, his polished facade cracking. For a moment, the mogul looked small, his wealth useless against the sky's whims. Ethan, wide-eyed, clutched his soccer ball, but his gaze was on Ronaldo, who seemed like an anchor in the storm. Mr. Thompson, too, watched the soccer star, a faint smile on his lips, as if he knew this was a moment of truth. The turbulence passed, and the cabin settled, but Carver's unease lingered. He straightened, brushing imaginary lint from his suit, but his hands trembled slightly. Ronaldo, sensing the shift, leaned over, his voice low. "First time flying through a storm?" Carver bristled, but his bravado was thin. "I've flown more miles than you've kicked balls," he snapped, but the words lacked bite. Ronaldo nodded, unfazed. "Fair enough. Just breathe, man. We'll land fine." The advice was simple, almost paternal, and it left Carver speechless, his pride stung by the kindness he didn't deserve. The turbulence had shaken more than the plane. It had cracked Carver's armor, exposing a vulnerability he'd spent years burying. He sat back, his eyes darting around the cabin, as if searching for a way to reclaim his dominance. But the passenger's attention was elsewhere. Ethan, emboldened by the wristband in his hand, unbuckled his seatbelt and crept toward Ronaldo, ignoring his mom's hushed protests. "Mr. Ronaldo, can I ask you something?" he said, his voice small but eager. Ronaldo pulled out his earbuds, giving the boy his full focus. "Shoot, champ." Ethan hesitated, then blurted, "How do you stay so strong, like when people talk bad about you?" The question hung in the air, raw and honest, and the cabin seemed to lean in. Carver's eyes flicked to Ronaldo, his curiosity betraying his disdain. The soccer star leaned forward, his voice steady but warm. "You don't let their words define you," he said. "You work harder, love stronger, and keep your eyes on your goal. Haters fade, but your heart doesn't." Ethan nodded, his face glowing with inspiration, and Sarah's eyes glistened as she watched her son absorb the words. Mia, standing nearby, smiled, her own heart lifted by the exchange. Carver, however, looked away, his jaw tight, as if the words had struck too close to home. Mr. Thompson chimed in, his voice gravelly but kind. "That's the truth, kid. I coached boys who crumbled under pressure. But this guy?" He nodded at Ronaldo. "He turned boos into cheers. That's real strength." Ronaldo shrugged, a faint smile on his lips. "Just kept running, coach." The conversation flowed, a quiet celebration of resilience, and the cabin felt warmer, more connected. Carver, isolated in his seat, felt the weight of his own silence. He pulled out his phone again, this time opening a photo of his daughter, Sarah, a teenager he hadn't spoken to in months. Her smile in the picture was a ghost of happier times, and for a moment Carver's face softened, his arrogance giving way to regret. The turbulence had rattled him, but Ronaldo's words to Ethan, about strength, about heart, were starting to seep in, unbidden and unwelcome. He snapped the phone shut, his movements sharp, as if to shut out the vulnerability creeping in. But the seed was planted, and the cabin's energy was shifting, pulling him toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. Mia returned, clearing trays with a quiet efficiency, but her eyes lingered on Ronaldo, grateful for the way he'd steadied the cabin. She paused by Carver, offering a dessert menu, but he shook his head, his focus elsewhere. "You know," he said suddenly, his voice low but edged with defiance, "I built a company from nothing. No one handed me anything." The words were directed at Ronaldo, a last-ditch effort to reclaim his narrative. Ronaldo looked at him, his eyes calm but piercing. "I believe you," he said simply. "But what did you build it for?" The question was soft, almost gentle, but it hit Carver like a freight train. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his usual sharpness failing him. Mia, sensing the tension, moved on, but her glance at Ronaldo was one of quiet respect. Ethan, back in his seat, was sketching a soccer play in his notebook, inspired by Ronaldo's words. Sarah watched her son, her heart full, and Mr. Thompson flipped through his newspaper, a satisfied smirk on his face. The cabin was a microcosm of lives touched by Ronaldo's presence, not through grand gestures, but through moments of raw, unfiltered humanity. As the flight neared its destination, the cabin lights brightened, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their descent. Ronaldo packed his magazine, his movements deliberate, as if savoring the quiet before the storm of fame that awaited him on the ground. Carver, meanwhile, sat rigid, his mind racing. The turbulence, Ronaldo's words, the passengers' admiration, it was all too much. A mirror held up to a life he'd built on power, but not purpose. He glanced at Ronaldo, who was now chatting with Maya about her brother's soccer tryouts, his laughter light but genuine. The mogul's chest tightened, a mix of envy and shame twisting inside him. He'd started this flight determined to put Ronaldo in his place, but now he was the one out of place, a stranger in a cabin full of people who saw something he didn't. The plane began its descent, the world tilting slightly, and Carver felt it, a shift, not just in altitude, but in himself. He wasn't ready to admit it, but the man he'd dismissed as a mere athlete was starting to show him what it meant to be truly great. The landing loomed, and with it, the promise of a reckoning that would change him forever. 3. The plane touched down with a gentle thud, the cabin stirring as seatbelts clicked open and passengers reached for their bags. The executive class, still buzzing with the quiet intensity of the flight, felt different now, less like a battlefield, and more like a classroom where a lesson had been taught, though not everyone had absorbed it yet. Cristiano Ronaldo stood, stretching his tall frame, his movements unhurried as he slung his duffel bag over his shoulder. His face was calm, the same steady calm that had carried him through the turbulence of both the sky and James Carver's arrogance. Carver, meanwhile, sat frozen for a moment, his hands gripping the armrests, his tailored suit wrinkled from the long flight. His eyes followed Ronaldo, not with the disdain of hours ago, but with a flicker of something new, uncertainty perhaps, or the faint stirrings of respect. The cabin's other passengers, Mia, the flight attendant, Ethan, the starstruck teen, Sarah, his grateful mother, and Mr. Thompson, the retired coach, moved with purpose, their brief encounters with Ronaldo leaving them lighter, inspired. The plane's doors opened and the world beyond waited. But for Carver, the real journey was just beginning, a journey inward that Ronaldo had unknowingly set in motion. Ronaldo stepped off the plane, greeted by a small group from the charity event he was attending, a low-key affair for kids in underserved communities, the kind of work he did quietly, without fanfare. A young organizer, Clara, her clipboard clutched tightly, smiled warmly as she shook his hand. "Mr. Ronaldo, the kids are so excited," she said, her voice tinged with awe. Ronaldo nodded, his sunglasses now perched on his cap, his eyes bright with purpose. "Let's make their day," he said simply, following her toward a waiting van. In the terminal, a small crowd had gathered, kids holding handmade signs, their parents snapping photos, their cheers soft but heartfelt. Ronaldo waved, crouching to high-five a boy in a worn soccer jersey, his laughter echoing through the glass-walled hall. Carver, trailing behind, watched from a distance, his briefcase heavy in his hand. The mogul's usual stride, confident, commanding, was slower now, his shoulders hunched as if carrying a weight heavier than his luggage. He saw the kids' faces light up, saw Ronaldo's genuine ease with them, and felt a pang he couldn't name. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was the ache of seeing something he'd never built, something no amount of money could buy. At the charity event, a modest community center in a gritty part of the city, Ronaldo was in his element. The gym was packed with kids, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor as they dribbled soccer balls, their laughter filling the air. Ronaldo joined them, kicking a ball with precision, his grin wide as he coached a shy girl named Lily through a penalty shot. Her family, Clara explained, had been supported by Ronaldo's foundation after losing their home to a fire. Lily's eyes sparkled as she scored, her small fists pumping in triumph. Ronaldo clapped, lifting her onto his shoulders as the crowd cheered, her giggles louder than the applause. Parents watched from the sidelines, their faces a mix of gratitude and pride, while volunteers handed out sports gear donated by Ronaldo's team. Clara, bustling between tasks, paused to watch, her clipboard forgotten. "He's not just here for the kids," she told a volunteer. "He's here for all of us." The words weren't meant for Carver, who stood near the entrance, his suit starkly out of place among the casual crowd, but they hit him hard. He'd come to the event out of curiosity, telling himself it was just a detour before his business meeting, but now he couldn't look away. Carver's phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder of the deal he was supposed to close in an hour, but he silenced it, his eyes fixed on Ronaldo. The soccer star was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, talking to a group of kids about discipline, about dreaming big but working harder. His voice was steady, his words simple but powerful, and the kids hung on every syllable. Lily, still glowing from her goal, clutched a new soccer ball, her mother wiping tears as she whispered thanks to Ronaldo. Carver's chest tightened, memories of his own daughter, Sarah, flooding back. He hadn't called her in months, too consumed by boardrooms and bottom lines. The last time they'd spoken, she'd asked why he was never home, and he'd brushed it off, promising soon. Now, watching Ronaldo with these kids, he saw what soon could mean: moments missed, bonds broken. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Sarah's number, but he hesitated, the weight of his pride still heavy. Instead, he opened the charity's website, scrolling through photos of Ronaldo visiting schools, building fields, shaking hands with kids like Lily. The mogul's fingers trembled as he clicked donate, entering a six-figure sum without a second thought. Not for clout, but because something in him was cracking open, something he'd buried under years of ambition. Back in the gym, Mia, who'd taken a half day to volunteer at the event, spotted Ronaldo and waved, her face bright with recognition. She'd brought her brother, Alex, a lanky teen who dreamed of going pro. Ronaldo greeted him with a fist bump, asking about his tryouts, his tone serious but encouraging. "You got the fire, Alex?" Ronaldo asked, his eyes locking onto the boys. Alex nodded, shy but determined. "Then don't stop. Not for anyone." Mia watched, her heart swelling, and Carver, standing nearby, overheard. The words echoed Ronaldo's advice to Ethan on the plane, and they stung, reminding Carver of the fire he'd once had, before money, before power, when he was just a kid with dreams. Mr. Thompson, who'd also shown up at the event, leaned against a wall, his arms crossed, watching Ronaldo with a quiet pride. "That man's a coach without a whistle," he muttered to Clara, who nodded, her eyes misty. The gym was alive with energy, a stark contrast to Carver's sterile world of glass towers and stock tickers. He felt like an outsider, but for the first time, he didn't want to dominate the room. He wanted to understand it. As the event wound down, Ronaldo took a moment to sit with Lily's mother, who shared her story of rebuilding after the fire. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and Ronaldo listened, his hand resting gently on hers. "You're stronger than you know," he told her, his voice low but firm. "And Lily's got that strength too." The woman nodded, tears falling, and Carver, watching from a distance, felt his throat tighten. He thought of his own mother, long gone, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep him fed, who'd believed in him when no one else did. He'd repaid her with success, sure, but not with presence, not with the kind of humanity Ronaldo showed so effortlessly. The mogul stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face like a wake-up call. He dialed Sarah's number, his heart pounding. "Hey, it's Dad," he said when she answered, her voice hesitant on the other end. "I know I've been gone. Can we talk? Maybe about soccer? I heard you like Ronaldo." Sarah laughed, surprised, and they talked for 10 minutes, about school, about her favorite players, about nothing and everything. It was the longest they'd spoken in years, and when Carver hung up, his eyes were wet, his heart fuller than any deal had ever made it. Inside, Ronaldo was wrapping up, signing a few last autographs as the kids reluctantly headed home. Clara thanked him, her voice thick with emotion. "You changed lives today," she said. Ronaldo shrugged, his smile humble. "Just doing what I can." As he grabbed his bag to leave, Carver approached, his steps tentative, his usual swagger gone. The mogul's suit was rumpled, his tie loose, and for the first time, he looked human, not like a titan of industry. "Ronaldo," he said, his voice low, almost breaking. "I was wrong about you. About a lot." Ronaldo paused, his eyes meeting Carver's, not with judgment, but with understanding. "We all get it wrong sometimes," he said, his accent soft. "Question is, what do you do next?" Carver swallowed, his throat tight. "I want to be better. For my kid, for myself." Ronaldo nodded, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Start small. Show up. That's where it begins." The words were simple, but they landed like a lifeline, pulling Carver from the abyss of his own making. As Ronaldo left, surrounded by kids chanting his name, Carver stayed behind, watching the gym empty out. Mia and Alex were talking excitedly about the day, Mr. Thompson sharing a story with Clara about his coaching days, and Sarah, Ethan's mom, was packing up, her son still clutching his wristband. The mogul felt a shift, a clarity he hadn't known he was missing. He pulled out his phone again, this time emailing his assistant to clear his schedule for the next week. No meetings, no deals, just time to visit Sarah, to maybe take her to a soccer game. He thought of Ronaldo, not as a rival now, but as a mirror, showing him what he could be if he let go of the need to prove himself. The community center's lights dimmed and Carver stepped into the evening, the city's hum a quiet backdrop to his thoughts. He wasn't transformed yet, not fully, but the seed was planted, watered by a man who'd turned a routine flight into a lesson in humanity. Ronaldo's legacy wasn't just goals or trophies. It was the lives he touched, the hearts he opened, and now, the mogul who'd once looked down on him was starting to look up, not at Ronaldo, but at the man he could become. The story of Cristiano Ronaldo and James Carver on that fateful flight is more than a tale of clashing egos. It's a mirror held up to our own lives, reflecting the choices we make and the values we hold. As I watched Ronaldo's quiet strength dismantle Carver's arrogance, I felt a mix of awe and conviction. Ronaldo's humility, his ability to stay grounded despite global fame, struck me as a rare kind of power. He didn't need to shout or flaunt his success. His actions, signing a wristband for Ethan, listening to Lily's mom, offering Carver a chance to rethink his life, spoke louder than any boardroom speech. Carver, on the other hand, started as someone I recognized all too well, driven, successful, but hollow, measuring worth in dollars rather than impact. His transformation, sparked by Ronaldo's example, hit me hard. It showed me that no one is too far gone to change, but it takes courage to face your flaws and choose a different path. What moved me most was Ronaldo's authenticity. He wasn't performing for the cabin or the kids at the charity event. He was just being himself, disciplined, kind, present. That raw humanity made everyone around him feel seen, from Mia's brother dreaming of soccer to Carver's daughter yearning for her dad's attention. It made me reflect on my own life. How often do I rush through moments, chasing goals or status, missing the chance to connect with someone? How often do I let pride or prejudice cloud my view of others? The story reminded me that true greatness isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. Ronaldo's legacy isn't just his goals or trophies, it's the hope he ignited in Ethan, the strength he gave Lily's mom, the mirror he held up for Carver. That's the kind of legacy I want to build, one rooted in empathy and action. The biggest lesson I took away is that change starts small but requires showing up. Ronaldo didn't lecture Carver. He lived his values, and that was enough to crack the mogul's armor. In my life, I can apply this by being more intentional, listening to a coworker's story, volunteering in my community, or simply smiling at a stranger. These acts, though small, ripple outward, just like Ronaldo's did. I also learned that humility isn't weakness, it's a strength that disarms and inspires. Carver's journey taught me it's never too late to pivot, to reach out to someone I've neglected, like Carver did with his daughter. I'm committing to one small step this week, calling a friend I've lost touch with, not for any grand reason, but just to reconnect. The story also showed me the danger of judging others based on stereotypes, as Carver did with Ronaldo. I'll challenge myself to see people for who they are, not what I assume they represent. This story isn't just about a flight or a soccer star, it's a call to live with purpose. We all have moments where we can choose to be like Ronaldo, lifting others up, or like the old Carver, building walls with our pride. I choose the former, and I hope you do too. Let's take this lesson into our daily lives. Be present, be kind, and be open to change. Whether it's mentoring a kid, mending a relationship, or donating to a cause, every step counts. Ronaldo showed us that greatness is in the heart, not the bank account. Let's make our own small acts of greatness starting today. If this story touched you as much as it did me, hit that like button to spread the inspiration. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of what truly matters. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more stories that challenge and uplift. Drop a comment below. What's one small step you'll take to live with more purpose? Let's keep this conversation going.